Welcome back to the Intro to UDK series, and I'm your instructor, Delmico L. Cunningham. So, as we talked about last time in our last video, we were going to deal with what this builder brush does, what this little guy actually helps us do inside of our UDK world. So to show that off, let's actually start a new map. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say New, Level, and you'll notice that this gives me a couple of map templates. So I can do an afternoon lighting, morning lighting, night lighting, midday. I'm just going to say I want a blank map. And I'm not going to save anything, so I won't say don't save. Alright. So if we look right now, I'm going to maximize my perspective viewport. I'm going to come right here and click and maximize my perspective viewport. So if I look right now, this is the default UDK environment. The default UDK world is this very dark, drab world. Now, if you have been inside of UDK development for very long, if you've used any of the older UDK development kits or Unreal development kits, you will know that UDK used to have a type of world that was called Subtractive. And what that meant was when you were presented with this completely black world, it was kind of like you were carving out of this gigantic mass or this gigantic black mass. Now UDK can be either an additive world or a subtractive world, and it really, you really can kind of mix and match, and you don't have to stick to the strict rules that you once did. So just know that what you're seeing is like this gigantic, massive piece of mass, really. And you're kind of carving out rooms inside of it, or adding things to it, or subtracting things from it. And that's kind of how the world works. So if you're used to traditional modeling, where you model with polygons, you'll know that your polygons, you kind of set your polygons up, and you manipulate the vertexes, the edges, and things of that nature, and then you get your shapes that you need. Well, UDK is really meant to carve out your world at a basic level. So think of everything almost realistically being these very blocky build-out shapes. So you can build your world out to a certain level, and then you can add in other geometry that you might bring from Maya or Max or Softimage or things like that. So let's talk about what this builder brush can do for me. So if you look over here in my left-hand column, I have my toolbox over here, and currently this is set up to be a cube. So to actually change the settings and the length and width and height and volume of this cube, I can come in here and right click on cube, and you know what, I'm going to say that I want this to be 1024 for X and 1024 for Y, and I want to have a height of 512. Now, one thing you'll notice that I'm doing is that everything is in multiples of 2. Now, the game likes multiples of 2. Multiples of 2 are easier for the CPU and for the game and for everything to stream in on this system, everything being on the power of 2. It's just easier for the computer to divide it. It makes it quicker. So it makes the computation happen in game actually very quick. What you'll notice when we get into textures and other things like that is that our textures are also powers of 2. They're divisible by 2. So when you start looking at textures, you'll hear terms like 1K texture, 2K texture, or a 4K texture. What they're talking about, a 1K texture is basically a texture that is 1024 by 1024. A 2K texture is 2048 by 2048. And a 4K texture is 4096 by 4096. So those are some of the things that kind of put those things into perspective. So let's look at the cube that I've made with the builder brush, and I can see that it's 124 square, and then it has a height of 512. And then what else I did in here was I turned on hollow, and when I turn on hollow, you can see that my cube has like another cube inside of it. So it has like a double cube, and it's a little bit smaller than the original cube. Well, you'll notice when you turn on hollow, you actually have a setting for wall thickness. This wall thickness is what gives you basically the thickness of your walls. And once again, you'll notice that that number is divisible by 2. It's 16. Right? The other thing you need to know is I'm going to come in here, I've got this, I'll say build, I can close this panel down, and you'll say, well, okay, it built this builder brush. Your builder brush changed, and it looks like the measurements you said, but I still don't see anything. I still don't see like a room or a world or anything else. Well, there's something else you have to do. Once you use your builder brush to make the container, you need to fill the container with something. So I'm trying to add a room into my world. So I have my builder brush set up, and I need to add a room into my world. So I'm going to hit Control A, and Control A adds in this box. But if we go inside of this box, and I come down inside of it, we can see that I actually have added a room. I've added a room into the world. So I now have a real room that I can look at and be inside of and actually interact with. So I've made my first room, and we've made it together. Together we have made our first room inside of UDK. Now, the way this works is this, and I'm going to move this guy off of here because I'm going to grab this just right here. So I'm going to grab my builder brush. See if I can grab it. Grab my builder brush and just move it off here to the side. So you'll see I still have my builder brush. I'm going to come here and unmaximize my viewport. So I'm going to click here and unmaximize this. And as we zoom out, we can see that I have my builder brush, which sits right here. And then I still have this brand new thing in here. This brand new thing is my add brush. This is an additive brush. So it is actively adding something to my world. So that's how I would make a room. So it's my additive brush. Now, these brushes that I'm talking about, if we look here at this CSG brushes, these are the CSG brushes that I can use to create and kind of block out my world. So right now I have this add brush, I have a subtract brush, I have a de-intersect brush, and an intersect brush, right? So what's really cool about this is that if I wanted to, for instance, cut a hole in the wall, I can easily do that by just making a new, taking my builder brush. I'll grab my builder brush, come here and right click on my brushes, and let's say we want this new brush. I want my door to be 512. So, and I'll just make this a little cube, so 512. So I'm not going to leave this 512 because then it would make my door actually cut into my floor and everything else. So I'm going to do this at 256. And maybe we'll change, let's see. So I'm looking at my top view right here. Maybe we'll change the width of the door because the width of the door looks kind of wide. So I'll do it at 256 as well. Alright. Actually, let's make it a cube. Let's make it a trifecta of 256. So I've got this. And one thing I want to do is turn off this hollow function because I don't want another cube. I just want a box. Alright, so I want just another box. And what I'm going to do here on X actually is I'm going to take this down to 16. And the reason I'm taking this to 16 is because if we look at this, this stuff is snapped to my grid. And it's snapped to my grid, and if you notice right here, I'm trying to snap this right here and it won't snap. Well, let's look at something. My grid units are currently set at 16. I can tell that because down here at the very bottom in my status line, I can see that my grid units are set to 16. So these grid units, each one of these spaces is 16 units. Now, inside of UDK, 16 units is roughly equivalent to 1 foot. So each one of these is a foot. Right? So each one of these squares is a foot. Now, when you manipulate your builder brush, sometimes it'll get wonky and it won't snap to where you really want it to snap to. So I'm going to show you how to fix that real quick. So what I want to do is come in here to where it has right beside my 16 for my grid number. I'm going to click on change drag grid, and I'm going to change my grid down to 8. So now let's do this, and then once I have it where I want it, I can go back up to 16. So you can see now I was able to take that, get it lined up, and if I look at this in my front view, so I should get this thing going here in my front view. If I look at my front view, I can actually grab what my door is and drag it down. and you can see that it's sitting right on the floor, and in the top view it's lined up where that's at. So what I want to do is I'm going to make sure I turn my perspective view around so we can see this happen. And remember, you can always hit the L key and it will orbit around your selection. And what I want to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to hit my subtract brush, or I can hit Control S. And what you'll notice is that UDK, I'll just move my builder brush out of the way. UDK, what it did was, where I had that brush at and I subtracted, it cut me a hole for like a door opening. So now I have a door to be able to walk through. Now, if we look at this in my perspective, not in perspective, but if we look at this in my front view, we can see here is a brand new brush. This is a subtract brush. So it has like this orangey yellow, like an orange yellow look to it. Your subtract brushes will always be the same color. Your add brushes will always be blue. And your subtract brushes will always be this very yellow or gold color brush. Now, that won't change. You have to make sure you keep up with where your brushes are at, because you can inadvertently grab a brush and move it. If I were to grab this brush and move it over here, you can see I still see my opening over here, but my brush is over here. Now, this takes us into something else that's very important inside of UDK, is building geometry. These brushes work in a very quick way, but when you move them, they have to be updated. So you can kind of think of this process that we're about to do as like rendering. So what I want to do is inside of UDK, up here in my main toolbar across the top, I have a option in here for build geometry for visible levels. So everything that's visible, I can build it. So what I want to do is I'm going to come up here to this little box, click on that guy, and it's going to give me some errors because we don't have some things set up yet. Don't worry about these errors right now, and we'll talk about what these are a little bit later. Right? So I'm just going to hit close on this box that pops up with the errors on it, and you'll see when I finish building geometry that my door now has actually moved from its original position to the new position. If I were to move this again, so I'll move this back over here, you'll see once again my door did not update. The door didn't just move with my brush. I have to come in here and click on build geometry. And when I do that, it actually builds in or cuts out the hole that I was planning to cut out in the first place. Right? So those are some basic things about UDK. So let's recap the things we talked about. One, we have this builder brush, and our builder brush is always in our world. Once again, we want to reiterate that. You can't get rid of the builder brush, right? Builder brush is always there. You can't get rid of it. You can take the builder brush and use these brushes up here. If you right click on any of these guys, you can actually make your builder brush change into tons of different shapes that are basic geometric shapes. And once you do that, you can start to carve them in however you want to, but have these basic geometric shapes. And then you can also use your CSG brushes. So when you want to make physical things in your world, or actually start making the roughing out of your world, you can use these CSG brushes. And you have an add brush, you have a subtract brush, you also have a de-intersect brush and an intersect brush, right? So when you're going to use these, you can hit Control A for your additive brush, you can hit Control S for your subtractive, Control I for your intersect, and Control D for your de-intersect brush, right? So using your brushes is how you build your basic world. Now in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to actually design out your level and start placing some things inside of it, as well as what to handle. When I look at this right now, my world is currently, as you can see in this bar, is currently unlit. But when I go in here to lit mode, you'll notice that everything goes completely black. We're going to talk about how to fix that, and actually how to bring in lights, and actually how to start planning out a level in our next video. Stay tuned.